Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is an afternoon update. All right, folks, I'm not going to go long with a monologue here in this afternoon update. I'll save that for the daily drop tonight, but I'll give you a basic overview of what we're going to cover. So Dr. Baden, who we've talked about at length here on the podcast, went on to the Dr. Oz show and pretty much straight out said that Jeffrey Epstein did not commit suicide. So we're going to read an article that covers that. It's from the Daily Mail, and the headline, exclusive, Jeffrey Epstein had burst capillaries in his eyeballs after he died, which pathologist tells Dr. Oz suggests he was strangled and did not hang himself. Now, if it was just Dr. Baden saying that, I'd be a lot more skeptical of what was going on, right? But it's not just that Dr. Baden is saying this. It's that the government hasn't provided any of the evidence to point to a suicide. There's no pictures, no video, and we all know the crazy circumstances leading up to Jeffrey Epstein's supposed suicide. The camera's not working, guards falling asleep, recording on the wrong tier. So what the government wants us to do is just put all of that to the side and say, all right, well, that was all just, that was just terrible, terrible errors. But we believe the narrative that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself, even though you've provided no evidence besides what your medical examiner had to say. So that's what they expect us to believe, folks, when their track record shows us that we should question everything that they tell us at this point. Every single thing that we hear from them, especially in this case, I will be questioning. Because I'll tell you, point blank, I do not trust Barr to do the right thing in this case. All right, so the article was written by Jennifer Smith for Daily Mail, and it was posted at 12:45 on January 20th. A forensic pathologist has claimed that Jeffrey Epstein was likely murdered and did not hang himself because he had burst capillaries in his eyes, which is consistent with manual strangulation and not hanging, DailyMail.com can reveal. In an exclusive clip from a Dr. Oz special set to air on Thursday, pathologist Dr. Michael Baden examines photographs of Epstein's eyes and other parts of his lifeless body taken during his autopsy. So, again, we have Dr. Michael Baden saying one thing, and we have the medical examiner saying a completely other, giving us a completely other story. Now, where does the evidence lead us? Because like I always say on the podcast, folks, we all know that words are wind, and people are going to craft whatever narrative that they think they have to craft to make themselves look better. Because remember, everybody wants to be the hero in their own story, folks. Okay? So we have to take everything with a grain of salt. Now, we have Dr. Baden, who is a renowned pathologist, a medical examiner who has been around for years and years and years. I remember his show on HBO when I was a little kid. So we have him saying one thing, and then we have a medical examiner who works for the state and for the federal government saying another. So people could say, well, Dr. Baden's being paid by the family. Well, the medical examiner is in the employ of the government. What's the difference? So it really comes down to, what do you believe, folks? And that's always what matters the most. What do you think happened? Me, personally, in my opinion, I don't think there is any way in hell Jeffrey Epstein killed himself in that cell that night. That is my personal opinion. In an exclusive clip from a Dr. Oz special set to air on Thursday, pathologist Dr. Michael Baden examines photographs of Epstein's eyes and other parts of his lifeless body taken during his autopsy. Dr. Baden was among physicians in the room when Epstein's autopsy took place. He says it is highly unusual that the cause of his death went from being undetermined when it was first ruled to suicide by hanging 5 days later. He said he believes there are many red flags which suggests he was murdered and did not kill himself. Yeah, well, look, first of all, how can they go from undetermined to a suicide 5 days later? That's a great point that Dr. Baden brings up. Especially when we didn't know the position the body was found because there was no photographs, there was no evidence to prove what they're saying. So how can they just automatically say, oh, yep, it's a suicide after it being undetermined? How can they come to that ruling so quickly? Makes you wonder, folks. It really makes you wonder. He said he believes there are many red flags which suggest he was murdered and did not kill himself. And in the article, folks, there's a ton of pictures, so I'm sure a lot of you have seen these pictures already. But if not, make sure you click on the article and, read through it yourself and check out these photographs. Chief among them are the burst capillaries and the fact that the color in his lower legs was pale and not purple or bluish, which, he says, would have likely been the case if he had hung himself from his bunk bed, as officials say he did. In a hanging, the arteries and the blood vessels, the veins, are both clogged off, and the person is pale. The face is pale, Dr. Baden said. It suffocates you. No blood goes up there, Dr. Oz continued. Dr. Michael Baden went on. That's right. No blood coming in or out. With a manual strangulation, there's a backup of a pressure, and little capillaries can rupture, and they're best seen in the eye. As folks, I really don't have much to add to all of that. I'm not a medical professional, and I'm not trained well enough, and I don't know enough to either confirm or deny what he's saying. But it sounds like something that is you would look for, right? The capillaries easily break in the eye from all kinds of things, and you would think from a strangulation you would see something like this from homicidal strangulation. But like I said, I'll leave that to the doctors and anyone out there that has a better idea than I do of this, because that's certainly not an avenue that I'm well versed in. So I don't dip my toes in places where they're not welcome. Dr. Baden also revealed why the pale color of Epstein's legs raises another question for him. The blood settles after we die. The so-called livity, if you're hanging, the livity is on the lower part of the legs. This would be like maroon purple front and back, and they aren't. His interpretation of the autopsy backs up claims from Epstein's estate and conspiracy theorists. Oh, they had to throw that in there. How about people that just aren't buying the truth? You know what the real conspiracy is? The real conspiracy is to act like this wasn't a big blackmail operation that was being maneuvered and wiggled by intelligence. That's the real conspiracy, okay? Why don't you add that to your next article? That he was murdered in August in his cell in the Metropolitan Correctional Center and did not hang himself. At the time, Epstein was awaiting trial on sex trafficking charges. Dozens of women who have accused him of trafficking them when they were underage girls and pimping them out to wealthy and well-known friends. When he was arrested, questions immediately were raised over who, if anyone, among his network of high-profile acquaintances would also be charged. Well, yeah, I'm surprised you didn't call that a conspiracy theory either. I'm surprised you guys didn't try to run cover for them either. The Daily Mail usually does better than that, but the whole conspiracy theorist thing, that label it's not welcome in this case, honestly, at this point. What we're talking about here is a cover-up, folks. We have long left the realm of conspiracy theory, okay? You want to talk about a conspiracy? What we're talking about, it's a conspiracy, but it's a criminal conspiracy by Jeffrey Epstein and all of his associates. The FBI continues to investigate the case, and there have been demands from some of Epstein's victims for people, including Prince Andrew, to face questioning over the late pedophile's decades-long reign of abuse in high society. Some of the victims say they too think Epstein was murdered or given the opportunity to kill himself by powerful associates who were frightened he would turn on them to try to lower his own prison term. Okay, look, folks, let's be very clear, okay? You have hardened mafioso, hardened cartel members, hardened Russian mafia members who have rolled over when the government started to lay in and dig into them. Do you really think that when the rubber met the road and Jeffrey Epstein was sitting before the man answering the question, if it got to that point, folks, I'm saying, obviously we all know he was being protected and it never got there, but do you think Jeffrey Epstein, a guy that lived that sort of lush life of high society, wouldn't start rolling over if it meant self-preservation? Oh, I beg to differ, folks. I beg to differ. And I have to be honest with you, I bet you Jeffrey Epstein would have rolled over very quickly if the opportunity presented itself, because this is a man that was very worried about self-preservation at all times. And I have to tell you, I really believe that is motive enough for people to say, hey, look, this guy could have definitely been killed. All of these powerful people that we've talked about that Jeffrey Epstein has ties to, you don't think any of these people and people that we don't know about weren't squirming when Jeffrey Epstein got arrested for the second time? Come on, folks. The initial death certificate was issued at the time of the autopsy. It's pending further study, getting more information. 5 days later, it was changed to hanging suicide, and one of the things the family wishes to know, the estate wishes to know, is what was that additional information that caused them to change it when then 5 months later, and the family still doesn't know what happened to it in the first encounter and what happened to him when he was found dead. Is that unusual that you have a 5-month gap? Dr. Oz asked him. He replied, it's very unusual, especially in a prison situation. Dr. Baden also examined the noose Epstein apparently used to kill himself and said it was inconsistent with his injuries. I agree with that. It looks to me like some sort of electrical cable, and I wonder why the sleep apnea machine, that cable wasn't taken into evidence as well, because it certainly looks like from the marks on his neck, and then you look at that what a cable would do, it certainly looks like it would be an electrical cable as opposed to one of these self-made nooses. Doesn't follow the furrow, number one. Number two, there's no evidence that there's any blood or tissue on any of the part of the loop. Most of all, this little area shows a pattern that wouldn't be made by the smooth surface of the sheet that was torn to make the noose. The problem, I think, why we're here today, 5 months later, is that there's been a total lack of transparency in what happened to Epstein. He said 100%. All right, look, the government works for us. They need to be more transparent in situations like this. This has nothing to do with national security, folks, all right? This has to do with a sick pedophile who was preying on young women, who was being protected at the highest levels, all right? Now, I don't understand how there is no outrage over this. I mean, real outrage on the legacy media stations. But then you say to yourself, well, why would there be when they're the ones who are providing cover? So again, it just goes all the way back, and it's one of those never-ending loops, folks. We cannot trust the legacy media to do the right thing in this case. On the night he died, Epstein had already once tried to kill himself before he had been moved into suicide watch in the prison, allegedly. He was inexplicably removed from suicide watch and put in a cell without a cellmate. The night he died, prison guards Tova Noel and Michael Thomas failed to complete multiple mandatory checks on him. They have been charged with falsifying documents for lying about performing the checks. And by the way, the only two people that have been charged so far. Think about that for a minute, folks. These two, Tova Noel and Michael Thomas, while obviously failures at their job, they're under the microscope, and Ghislaine Maxwell's skipping around, living her life, eating all that good high society food, living it up, following it down, and washing it down with some champagne, and nobody else is arrested but these two? I wonder how that happens. They have been charged with falsifying documents for lying about performing the checks. Prosecutors say they were in fact surfing the internet and napping at their desks. Yep, so there you have it, folks. Dr. Baden goes on to the Dr. Oz show, which is on network television, and lays out his case. Says that Jeffrey Epstein was murdered, Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself, and that the evidence does not back up the official narrative. What we have been saying here on this podcast from day one, okay? The days of the government throwing the wool over our eyes, those days are over. They can no longer control the narrative any longer, folks, okay? The narrative can no longer be manipulated by them because the internet enables us to directly talk with each other and leave them and their puppets in the legacy media out of the equation. So we're going to keep on going, folks. We're going to keep on reporting, and I am truly convinced that it's because of all of your interest in this case and the other, all the people that are creating content and everybody who has rallied as basically a community at this point to go after these people. If it wasn't for everything that you folks are doing, there'd be no way that we'd even be here right now. They would have buried this under the impeachment stuff so long ago that none of us would have even remembered it happened. But we had had enough, right? The people of this country, the people from around the world have had enough. You know, I was looking at my demographics, and I have fans on all 6 continents now. people listening to the show on all 6 continents. That's crazy to think about. And even in Antarctica, we all know that the penguins are tuning in too. So on every single continent, people are listening, folks. And I'm just a little small portion of this. There are people with way huger platforms. But what we do here is we do our little part, right? That's all we can do is what we can do. And we're going to keep on plugging away to make sure that these people have no quarter, they have no rest. Because the year 2020, folks, yeah, you know what the year 2020 is. The year 2020 is the year that we turn the predators into the prey. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. If you would like to support the podcast, you can do that by clicking on the GoFundMe link inside of the description box. All right, everybody, I will be back later on tonight with a daily drop.